learn and get by being an architecture student.
The architecture student must be able to pursue the application of basic theory and architecture knowledge. The lecturers teach us architecture knowledge by giving or providing reading materials or books that make students independent.
We have a studio as a place to do things that relate to learning architecture works. The studio makes students feel
The
comfortable
architecture student
to
must
learning
be able to
architecture
pursue
works
the
because
application of
it
basic
is
theory
one of
and
the places
architecture
for
knowledge.
architecture
The
students
lecturers
that
teach
can
us
easily
architecture
exchange
knowledge by
ideas
giving or
with each other.
providing reading materials
The
or books
conclusion
that
about
make
the purpose of
students
being an
independent.
architecture student
Is to design our thinking
We
ability
have a
and our
studio as a place
creativity,
to
building
do things
design,
that
and to
relate
improve
to
human
learning
life, such as
architecture works.
create a
The
free and
studio
fun
makes
space
students
for
feel
all
comfortable
activities
to
in life.
learning
Be able to
architecture
pursue
works
the
because
application of
it
basic
is
theory
one
and
of the places
architecture
for
knowledge.
architecture
The
students
lecturers
that
teach
can
us
easily
architecture
exchange
knowledge by
ideas
giving or
with each other.
providing reading materials or
The
books that
conclusion about
make
the purpose of
students
being an
independent.
architecture student
Is to design our thinking
We
ability
have a
and our
studio as a place
creativity,
to
building
do things
design,
that
and to
relate
improve
to
human
learning
life, such as
architecture works.
create a
The
free and fun
studio makes
space
students
for
feel
all
comfortable
activities
to
in life.
learning
Be able to
architecture
pursue
works
the
because
application of
it
basic
is
theory
one
and
of the places
architecture
for
knowledge.
architecture
The
students
lecturers
that
teach
can
us
easily
architecture
exchange
knowledge
Back in
by giving or
2018,
providing
when I was a
reading materials.
freshman,
The
I
conclusion about
always
the
asked
purpose of
myself,
being an architecture
will I ever
student
fit
is
in
to
this
design
community?
our thinking ability and our
Because architecture
creativity,
is
Hello,
building
Prof.
design, and
Ellis.
to improve
you
human
have to
life,
be
such
in
as
We
groups.
will
create
start
a
the
free
webinar.
and fun space for all activities in life. Be able to pursue the
because
application of
it
Kita
is
basic
mulain
one
theory
ya,
of
and
the places
Ibu
for
architecture
Fiza.
knowledge.
architecture students that can easily exchange
Back in
ideas with each other.
2018, when I was a
Well,
freshman,
ladies and gentlemen,
I
this is
always
the
asked
purpose of our
myself,
talk. For
will I
sake
ever
of
fit
time,
in this community?
may I have your attention, please? The webinar is about to
Because
begin.
architecture is
Thank you very much for preparing yourself to join of this webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. May you always be healthy and happy in the pandemic COVID-19 situation. Welcome all of you to this international webinar, session 1, with the topic, the structural perspective of researches to the traditional architecture in Asia, a study on Southeast Eastern Asia houses. This webinar organized by Universitas Negeri Makassar in collaboration with Universitas Tanjung Pura. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce myself. My name is Sulfaiza from Universitas Negeri Makassar, the host of today's webinar. I'm very pleased to see you to attend it even though virtual media. Ladies and gentlemen, let me inform this webinar will last 4 hours with 3 outstanding speakers. So please stay tuned until the end of the webinar. The webinar will be guided by Professor Madia, Dr. Elisa Sabrina Ismail from University Technology Malaysia as the moderator of today's webinar. Without any further ado, to Prof. Elisa Sabrina Ismail, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Ulfiza, and thank you for inviting me to become the moderator for today. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon to all participants from Malaysia and Indonesia, and konnichiwa to viewers from Japan and other parts of the region. Just a quick reminder and housekeeping before we start today's webinar session, in which the organizer hopes that the audience will adhere to. Firstly, it is recommended that all participants can turn on your video throughout this webinar session. Second, always mute yourself during the webinar session, unmute yourself and speak only when it is your chance to speak. Please type all your questions and queries for today's speaker via the chat box, and the organizer will address to your questions accordingly. The organizer also will release the recording of the webinar in YouTube a day after the event, and you can check the recording via the link that the organizer will share at the end of this session. So I hope that all participants will fill in the online attendance link that will be posted in the chat box, and the organizer will provide an e-certificate for all participants within 7 days after the event. Okay, with that, just a small information. My name is Elisa Sabrina Ismail, that had been introduced by Madam Ulfiza, and I'm from UTM, University Technology Malaysia, will be the moderator for today's seminar. And I hope that all of you can sit back, relax, and enjoy today's session. Today is 22nd of June, which is a historic event for all, as this is the first session of joint webinar series in architecture organized by the Department of Architecture, Universitas Negeri Makassar, and Universitas Tanjung Pura in year 2021, representing the two public universities in Kalimantan and Sulawesi, Indonesia. In conjunction with this, there will also be three more webinar sessions to follow suit in the future till the end of this year. Today's webinar session entitled The Structural Perspective of Researchers to the Traditional Architecture in Asia, which is a study on Southeast Eastern Asia houses. And it is a very vast topic indeed for the professional, academician, and researchers in the fraternity, and the primary purpose of this joint webinar series is to explore researchers' perspective on the structure of traditional houses in Southeast Eastern Asia. The Southeast Eastern Asia, as you can see, is rich in history. It encompasses the collective and diverse customs and traditions that is embedded and influence its architecture and the built environment. However, among all types of building typologies, the traditional houses are a unique creation as it represents the efforts of a community to carve a style of its own that can embody its culture, customs, and identity right in the place where the communal life itself revolves around. The traditional house also introduces to the observer the elegance of the building itself as a beautiful mass, and if we observe more closely the proportion structures, intricate carvings, the beautiful ornaments emphasize the existence of past people work and show the riches of local culture that cannot and should not be forgotten by the current and future generation. So, in honoring the Universitas Tanjung Pura as the organizer for today's occasion, it is great pleasure to welcome and invite the Rector of Universitas Tanjung Pura, Professor Dr. Garuda Wiko, for his welcoming speech. Please put your hand and give a big round of applause to Professor Dr. Garuda Wiko. So the floor is yours, Professor Dr. Garuda. Over to you.
Thank you, Miss Eli Sabrina Ibrahim, as a moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, the Honorable Rector of Universitas Negeri Makassar, my colleague, Professor Dr. Insinyur Hussein Sham, MTP, IPU.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello,
Thank you.
Prof.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. The distinguished speakers, Dr. Teh Andi Abidah, STMT from Universitas Negeri Makassar, Associate Professor Dr. Teh Erich Lechner from Technisch Universiteit Wien, Australia, and Professor Dr. Ges Hirohide Kobayashi from Kyoto University. The pro audience, ladies and gentlemen, with warm greeting, I welcome you all to this webinar entitled The Structural Perspective of Researcher to the Traditional Architecture in Asia, a study on Southeast Eastern Asia houses. This webinar is a joint activity between the Department of Architectures of Universitas Tanjung Pura and Universitas Negeri Makassar, which will last for 4 seasons from 22 June to 13 July 2021. As Director of Universitas Tanjung Pura, I provide my full support to any productive collaboration activities, especially the ones involving international partners. The international collaboration has been a necessity for all higher institution activities in Indonesia. Universitas Tanjung Pura find it important to have international network with both foreign higher education institutions and other entities. This is an effort to improve academic quality and the unavoidable demand in the development of the current global network of universities. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I truly appreciate the initiative by the Department of Architectures from Universitas Tanjung Pura and Universitas Negeri Makassar. The Department of Architecture of Universitas Tanjung Pura has been very active in conducting collaborative activities involving international partners. Within 2 years, the Department of Architectures, working hand in hand with the International Affairs of Universitas Tanjung Pura, have had remarkable projects. In 2019, they conducted a summer program with a title of 2019 Joint Summer Program, DAYAX, Engaging Youth for Sustainable Indigenous Community, inviting speakers and students from Taiwan and Malaysia. In the same years, a joint research was conducted between Universitas Tanjung Pura and University of College of Technology Sarawak with the topics of
Recording in progress.
Malay vernacular architecture and regionalism in Borneo architecture. In 2020, Universitas Tanjung Pura and National Taitung University conducted a joint research with the title Term of Privacy and the Longhouse of Nek Bindang Village of West Kalimantan. A guest lecturer was invited in the same year, Professor Tin Chiang, PhD, from National Taitung University. The summer program was organized in 2020 as well. Last year, theme was social adaptation of indigenous people in the traditional house to a new modern habit. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in this prestigious occasion, I invite all of you to work together with Universitas Tanjung Pura. We will be more than happy to hear your partnership proposal. You can either contact me or Dr. Zairin Zain to initiate our partnership. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the traditional houses were designed and built by the local to meet their specific needs, accommodating the values, economies, and lifestyle of the culture among them. In other words, the local design their houses on purpose. As time went by, the traditional house is starting to be abandoned by people. This became the interest of our scholars. The research on the traditional architecture in Asia with a wealth of knowledge about the very unitary building process is influenced by belief, tradition, and culture. This makes the architecture of traditional houses in the Southeast and East Asia interesting to be discussed further. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, lastly, I hope with their webinar series, all speakers, moderators, and audience can be provided with fruitful understanding of your discipline. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Garuda Wiko, for the welcoming speech. To continue on, I would like also to invite the Rector of Universitas Negeri Makassar, Professor Dr. Insinyur Haji Hussein Sham, MTP IPU Asian Engineer, to give his welcoming speech and officiate the opening of this first webinar session. The floor is yours, Professor Dr. Insinyur Haji Hussein Sham. Over to you, Professor.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Alisa Sabrina from UTE Malaysia. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
And good afternoon. EU Honorable Professor Dr. Garuda Wiko, SHM, SE, as a rector of Universitas Tanjung Pura, the Dean of Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Tanjung Pura, Dr. Retnat, Insinyur RM Rustam Maji, MT, IPU, and the Dean of Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Negeri Makassar, Professor Dr. Insinyur Muhammad Yahya, MKes MN, IPU, Asian Eng. And the Senate segment, the Vice Rector, the Dean, the Director of postgraduate program and the high official of Universitas Negeri Makassar and Universitas Tanjung Pura. I also would like to welcome the invited speakers, Prof. Eric Lechner from Technic University, Wien, Austria, Prof. Hirohide Kobayashi from Kyoto University in Japan, Professor Dr. Ing Himasari Hanan, MSA, Institut Teknologi Bandung in Indonesia, Dr. Sains Zairin, MT from Universitas Tanjung Pura in Indonesia, Dr. Andi Abida, STMT from Universitas Negeri Makassar in Indonesia. It's a great pleasure for me to extend to you all a very warm welcome, especially for the speakers who have accepted to invitation to attend in this international webinar organized by the incredible collaboration of Architecture Department, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Negeri Makassar, and Universitas Tanjung Pura. Therefore, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all organizing committee, especially for Dr. Zain Zairin, MT, and Dr. Andi Abida, STMT, to ensure the success of this webinar. Hopeful, this international webinar, which cover as with range of architecture in culture, technology, and research, will provide the valuable knowledge for all participants. Share the research finding to society and continuously develop new idea and knowledge. Those things are two significant steps in improving the quality of nation around the world. Increasing our familiarity to each other, and finding under development. Finally, this is great time for me to declare the official opening. The structural perspective research today to the traditional architect in Asia and study on Southest Asia houses. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me wish you a very enjoy event. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to both rectors from Universitas Tanjung Pura and Universitas Negeri Makassar, Professor Dr. Garuda Wiko and Professor Dr. Insinyur Haji Hussein Sham. It is hoped that a strong collaboration with all universities involved today can be achieved in the academic and the research field for the betterment of the future in many, many countries. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to continue with today's webinar, we have three prominent speakers from three continents, Indonesia, Australia, and Japan. It is such an honor to have these three speakers to spare their precious time sharing experience and valuable knowledge with us today. These three speakers are the first one is Dr. Teknikai Andi Abida from Universitas Negeri Makassar, Indonesia. The second speaker is Professor IR Dr. Teknikai Eric Lechner from the Technical University of Vienna, Austria. And the third speaker is Professor Dr. GS Hirohide Kobayashi from the Kyoto University, Japan. But just a quick reminder, each speaker will be given 20 to 25 minutes each to deliver your speech. Questions for all three speakers will be answered at the end of the session after all three speakers had delivered their speech. Please reserve your questions if you wish to correspond to the speakers, or you can also type your questions in the chat box and the organizer will attend to all your questions at the end of this session. So thank you all for your cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, let me briefly introduce the first speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Teknikai Andi Abida. Dr. Abida received her doctorate from Vienna University of Technology in 2019 and currently is an academician in the State University of Makassar. She had been involved in many research projects relating to urban design and planning in Indonesia and abroad. And she is also an active member with the Indonesia Institute of Architects IAI and the Indonesian Institute of Urban Designers IARK. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Teknikai Andi Abida to deliver her topic on culture and tradition on Southeast Asia houses. Please give a big round of applause to Dr. Abida, and the floor is yours, Dr. Abida. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Professor Elisa. Can you give me a star? Kelihatan, Ji? Thank you very much. I would like to explain about my research about culture, about the culture and tradition of indigenous house design. This is Indonesia. Indonesia consists of so many islands and so many tribes. In the data from World Bank, the ethnic in Indonesia is 1,300 ethnic and sub-ethnic. And then this is Sulawesi. This is Sulawesi. My research about this is Sulawesi Island. My research in location in South Sulawesi, in location in Sopeng. This is in Kajang. I will compare two ethnic groups in South Sulawesi, Kajang Dalam of the Amatua Kajang tribes in Bulukumba Regency, Bugis Sopeng in Sopeng Regency. In the picture, you can look the Kajang. This is Kajang Dalam. The community Kajang Dalam, and this one in location in Bugis, but all Bugis. This the clothes is generally very different in Kajang. Kajang we have to use all black color. And then tradition and culture. Dwelling embody human interaction with the temporal and spiritual. Construction and tradition dwelling of both of the Kajang and the Bugis are considered a ritualistic rite and customary role and use to deal with all aspects of the form and element that still home, such as size, orientation, construction material and method, shape and position of window, door, kitchen, and staircase. The next, kajian dalam has remained virtual undiluted by all external social, political, and economic change, influenced by deep spiritual and cultural connection with their environment. A strict adherence to customary rule passed down orally, called Pasan Rikajang, houses are considered embodiments of the Pasan Rikajang, which regulated every aspect of life. Externally, no outward sign of difference in social status, in clothing, dining activity, and housing design are visible. Internally, gender sonus only. In the Bugis in Sopeng, cultural has been influenced by social politic change, Hindu, Dutch colonial, Dutch administration, and independent. Indonesian independent, and also Islam. However, in certain locations in Bugis, even today, built tradition house using customary construction method that regulated house size and proportion. Externally, clear signs of social hierarchy are visible as Bugis society is separate into several levels of nobility and commoner respectively. Internal social hierarchy zone for visitor seating as well as gender zones. Certainly, elements of the Bugis have mystic attributes that embody the relationship with the spiritual world. Housing orientation, kajian dalam highly detailed percept of the Pasan Rikajang aspect of indigenous life in order for community to live in a symbolic relationship with their environment, including sustainability of natural resources, allocated of land according to purpose, communal garden, household garden, and sacred space. Spiritual aspect considered to be more important than the physical environment and Kajan society. All horses orientation exactly the same way, facing the sunset west, back against their venerate customary forest is the window open the sun and their north and south walls. This is Kajang Dalam, and this is customs forest. So the orientation home cannot orientation to custom home because this is forbidden according to regulation of custom. The Bugis three change in orientation. When the Hindu, the home orientation the north, and when Islam coming in early 17th century facing west, the Qibla orientation, home of Bugis orientation to Qibla, and then Indonesia government built infrastructure in 1970. The housing, the regulation, all hosts have to oriented to the road. This is settlement in the all settlement in Sopeng. This Kampung Madela. This orientation in Qibla. This is also in Sopeng Jam Pesarangnya. This settlement coming before Dutch colonial in Sopeng. This is also orientation to Qibla. And then this is new settlement. The settlement coming in 1970. We can look the orientation. The settlement is not to Qibla, but their orientation, home orientation to the road. This is also the Kampung Laringgi. This is also new settlement. The owner, the host, not all orientation to no orientation to Qibla, but the road. Host form, generally basic step and construction of traditional Kajan and Bugis houses are similar in the form to traditional houses built by the Malay, Eastern Sumatra, Malay Peninsula, and Borneo coastal regions. The Mandar, Western Sulawesi, and Makassar, Southern Sulawesi, with her edge shape of frame for their structure that don't use stake or nail in their construction. Kajang and Bugis also share the following attribute: rectangular in shape. The floor of the houses is rising off the ground 180 and to 200 centimeter. The pole used as still to go directly from the ground to roof without any connection. The structures of the beam support for the floor and the roof of the house. Gable roof for the main house and division of public and private space. Dimension. House dimension are based on the dimension of human body. Master builder will the size of rooms and heights of the window based the owner's own body measurement. The anthropomorphic strata of indigenous dwelling remain deployed ingrained into both Kajang and Bugis culture. Even today, with underlying belief that these rights unite the house and soul of its owner. Measurement, the husband and sometimes use body for a wife may be used to based on a hand span to the span of both hands together, arm span, leg length, finger length, thumb length. This is the method to take measure to the house. This is for the width. This is the length. This method. Kajian dalam range measurement. This is with like the same color in Lura in local language. 190 to 350 centimeter, and left latte. Latte is local language or usually the local people call latte or latte. The measurement to 250 until 355 centimeter. Dimension small lura to lura dengan to latte with a rice storage area tala-tala along the back. Large tulura by 3 latte with rice storage tala-tala along back. But in the Bugis, range of measurement with latte in the Bugis width of house is called latte, but in the Kajang width is called lura. 150.5 to 245 centimeter and length lontang. Lontang in Bugis called lontang, but in the Kajan dalam called latte or lanta. Dimension of Bugis house commoner small the commoner 2 latte by 2 lontang with small veranda level. Middle class commoner 2 latte by 3 lontang with veranda. And highest level of aristocracy 3 or more latte and 4 more lontang with veranda and lego. Kitchen, joke and hallway, or in local language call it pumping, but in the carry out their daily activities. For example, where the environment cooking, eat, rest, as storage food, clothing, ceremonial item, keep livestock, and receive visitors. This is a form of Bugis house, and also the same in Kajan Dalam. This is Kajan Dalam house, the house Kajan Dalam. This is order of room, and this is a Bugis. This is the tala-tala. In the Kajang, this is tala-tala. Didn't use a Lego indirect to main house, but in the Bugis have a Lego, but all the stair landed in Lego. This is floor in Bugis for plan. This is hallway or colored in local language. In language is thumping. This is also thumping, but for this time, so it not easy to find out because so many people change their home. This is a ritual element. Before build the house, the people will do ritual. This is a corpore. This is an important part of the Bugis house, also the Kajan Dalam. The element window. This is a space. This window of Kajang. This is small, and all people the same the window. No, the same. This is but in the Bugis, the window is signs, symbol of social status. This is of a noble. This is a noble. This is commoner, and also this commoner. Kajan Dalam, due to communal dynamic of the Kajang, where social harmony through life or symbolic like living in symbolic relationship with nature and each other. There are no form ornamentation used on the houses nor on the people themselves, as every citizen is have only limited number of outfit woven, being of solid black and sewn by the female member of the tribes. Bugis, for the Bugis, ornamentation is not just an aesthetic enhance, but every aspect from the placement to what it look like to the material it is made from can indicate the owner's social rank and what area visitor may occupy according to their rank social. We can look this is the roof of a Kajang. This is Kajang. This is the same angle, the same slope, but in the Kajang Dalam only one type the roof, not like only one layer, but in the Bugis have so many layers. This is 5 layers, 3 layers, 1 layers, without layers, any but different. This is communal, but different society, different level social rank. Flora might be in the form of the following flower. This is a flower booth. The wish that people will love the host owner and his offspring. Parendreng, this is a parendreng flower. This is in also the parendreng. Creeping flower fine which symbolize the owner desire to have many grandchildren who will scatter far and wide like parendreng flower. A pineapple, it is like a pineapple, the symbolic the wish that people will love the host owner and witness a pineapple offspring. Bamboo shoot, this is a parendreng flower. This is the also of the host owner to be helpful and flower. I don't have the sample. I think thank you very much for my presentation. I will offer to you to moderator. Thank you very much, Professor Alicia.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Abida, for such an engaging content on Kajang Dalam. and it is an eye-opener in understanding the unique design styles of Kajang Dalam traditional houses, which is richly embedded with the values, symbols, philosophies of multicultural and traditions. So before we move on to the next speaker, just a quick reminder, kindly please type your questions in the chat box and the organizer will attend to all your questions to Dr. Abida at the end of this session. And also please fill in the attendance link for the first session in the chat box. So thank you again, Dr. Abida, for such an interesting lecture on Kajang Dalam. And I hope that all the participants will have questions to Dr. Abida and we will attend to it at the end of this session. So thank you again, Dr. Abida. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to continue on, let us move to the next speaker. The second speaker is Professor IR Dr. Technikai Eric Lefner from the Technical University of Vienna, Austria. And Professor Dr. Eric Lefner is area of expertise is involving in the field of study on architecture in Asia, America, Africa, and Oceania, and which focuses on the relationships of function, form, structure, and symbolism in architecture. This also includes the study on the principles of architectural development within the environment of technology, society, and art. Professor Dr. Lechner is the president of the Institute for Comparative Research in Architecture, IVA-ICRA, and the vice president of the Austrian Indonesian Society, AIS, and also is the member of the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS. And Professor Dr. Lechner is also currently actively involved in many research projects and publications worldwide in traditional architecture. So without further ado, please put your hand together and welcome Professor IR Dr. Technikai Eric Lechner on his topic Roof Types as Indicators of Regional and Social Identities. And over to you, Professor Dr. Lechner. The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I want to thank you all, dear colleagues, dear committee, for the invitation to this webinar. I'm very happy to join this webinar. My presentation will go about roofs, and maybe I can start it. Moment. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I want to thank you all, dear colleagues, dear committee, for the invitation to this webinar. Can you see my presentation? Yes? Okay. Okay. So, moment, it is. So, you can see it? You can hear me? Okay, thank you. First of all, a short introduction. I think of all cultural expressions, is architecture the most significant field. Architecture is an expression of a particular epoch. Architecture is an expression of a particular region. Architecture is an expression of a particular society. And architecture is much more permanent than other cultural imprints. Architecture is the material expression of culture, and not only single objects are relevant here, but also ensembles. And through tradition, in the use of the same or similar building forms over a longer period of time, there is a continuity of a building culture. And all these factors lead to an identification of the individual, of a society, of a region, of an epoch, with the corresponding appearance of architectural expressions. And in my lecture, I make a special reference to building forms in Indonesia, because Indonesia has the greatest diversity of different ethnic groups, of different regional building forms in Southeast Asia. And the examples in this lecture, I will take mainly from the islands Sumatra, Java, and Bali, simply because I know these islands better personally. Characteristics of regional architecture in Indonesia, a comparison of modern architecture. When I talk about architecture, as an identification factor of a certain region. To which architectural appearance does this statement refer? What is the regional identity of modern buildings, of modern cities in Indonesia compared to other regions in the world? Here I show examples from Indonesia compared to examples from North America, South America, Australia, Africa, Europe, and ranking. There is little evidence of an Indonesian architecture there, or even an architecture of a particular region on the various Indonesian islands. And a comparison of religious architecture, certain types of buildings also fall in this category. And how does an Indonesian mosque, for example, differ from a mosque anywhere else in the world? Differences are not particularly pronounced. And a regional or Indonesian architecture hardly exists here. These are, after all, important forms of architecture. However, the situation is completely different in traditional vernacular architecture. Here, there are very specific characteristics which decidedly indicate regional identity, the identity of particular ethnic groups and regions. Nevertheless, there are also common features that apply to most, to not all, traditional housing types. And in this lecture, I will focus not only on the differences, but also on the similarities of this traditional architecture. And particular emphasis will be given to the roof. The tripartite structure. Tripartite is a consistent characteristic of a predominant number of building types of vernacular and also sacral architecture of Southeast Asia. There are three levels, there are three spheres. And in the old religions of Southeast Asia, Hinduism, Buddhism, the tripartition is found. The world, the cosmos, is divided into the spheres: underworld, earthly world, supernatural world. The underworld is the sphere of demons and lower beings. The earthly world is the sphere of humans, and the supernatural world is the sphere of gods. And this situation is also reflected in the tripartite division of the dwelling house in many building cultures of Southeast Asia. Here, the substructure, the storage room, the stable for domestic animals. The vault zone is the space for inhabitants, and the roof zone is often regarded as a sacred sphere of ancestors. The vault zone, the living zone, is elevated above the terrain. Several reasons for this: hygienic reasons, for example, in the humid tropical climate, but also symbolic reasons. Physical elevation is often equated with a higher value, a higher social rank. Expression is there also in linguistic terms. A high-standing person is not meaning a person standing on a table or a ladder, but a person of high rank. The high society is the higher ranking social class. The upper 10,000, the same social meaning. The social meaning of the term high is also often implemented in a physical way. The ruler sits on a high throne about his subordinates. Please note also the word subordinates here. The lower ranking persons prostrate themselves in front of high ranking persons, and in some societies, those of lower rank may only approach those of higher rank by crawling on the ground. The conclusion: the elevated position of a human being, of an object, of a component, is an expression of its rank. And the value of components is increasing from bottom to top. The uppermost component of a building, therefore, is the highest ranking. And it is the roof. A comparison between the house and the human being, the tripartite human, the tripartite house, these comparisons are not new. You can find them in both historic and more recent literature, and actually also with body structure of human beings. The tripartiteness is present and addressed. The tripartite human body is the head, the trunk, limbs. The limbs, in the limbs, there are no organs. In the trunk, all the organs except the brain. And in the head is the most important organ, the brain. The brain which makes the individual a human being in the first place. The tripartite house, the meaning can be transferred there in the dwelling house. In the substructure, the legs of the house, there's no residence for people. The base, storage room, domestic animals. In the wall area, the trunk of the house, is the residence of people, the living space. And the roof area, the head of the house, in many regions, is it called a residence of the ancestors, a residence of the ghosts. And here in some ethnic groups is the storage of the animals. And the meaning of the rooms, the roof is not only the highest ranking part of a house, but is also the most important in terms of structure. The main reason for the construction of a house is to provide protection against the weather. And the highest priority here is given to the roofing. There are houses without walls. However, a structure without a roof will by no means be called house. Roof shapes, short introduction in the image, you see main types of roof forms in Western cultures, in traditional building cultures of South Asia. Most of these roof types do not appear in this region, and here I mark those roof forms which occur in matching or similar form, also in traditional architecture in Southeast Asia, especially in Indonesia. But in Indonesia, there are some traditional roof shapes that do not appear in other regions of the world. Here are a few examples for them. Flores, extremely raised hip roofs with distinctively inward curved roof surfaces. Sumba, joggler-like roof forms with extremely steep central part. Batak Karo, gigantic foot hip roofs with pronounced sloping gables. Minangkabau, multiple gable roofs with several pronounced gable peaks. Batak Toba, gable roofs with curved, rich, and sloping, widely overhanging gable peaks. In Java, a joggler roof with a steep central part. In the Toraja region, gable roofs with curved, rich, and sloping, extremely wide, projecting gable ends. In many of these special roof types, there are general criteria can be detected with allow further conclusions about the meaning of the corresponding roof form. It is height, it is symmetry, and it is the multi-part roof surface. Yet you see, sorry, I missed to take the right picture. The height. What about the height? Introduction, the height of roof is a characteristic for various meanings. It is an expression of a certain regional identity. It is an expression of prestige within a regional building style. The height concerns first the relation of height to other structures. Tallest almost always considered the most significant in traditional architecture. Second, the proportion of the structure. Tower-like structures are of particular importance. And third, the position of the structure or part of the structure. And the most important structure in traditional architecture usually is the highest part of the structure. And the highest part of the building is the roof. And the roof, a symbol as a feature of identity and rank of the building. I will show this later on some. By the way, a comparison with head coverings in traditions of various cultures, the high caps in traditional costumes, for example, in Sulawesi and Kalimantan. Here is on the left above the picture, there's especially remarkable the photo, a much shorter boy towers over the taller girl with his cap. The photo next to it, a man with a high cap from Kalimantan, and then Christian high-ranking dignitaries. And you see the Austrian bishop wears a very similar cap as the man from Kalimantan, headgear of the Russian patriarch, like a dome in Russian churches. so on. The bottom line photos Buddha's head and the flame of enlightenment. They are similar to Buddhist sacred buildings, the Chiti, and the Siamese king wears a headdress that pop up. A temple, the Christian Pope wears multiple crowns as headgear, and the Turkish Sultan wears a huge, oversized turban as headgear. And the rank and identity of the person is so expressed by elements at the highest place of the person, the headgear. And decisive for this element is height and positioning at the highest spot. The facing sides, front side, sorry. In most traditional building cultures, a building has a particular side that is more prominently developed than the other sides. We speak here of the show facade, and the show facade is visually more articulated than other sides, more decoration, etc. The show facade is facing the public space. Here usually is also the entrance. And the show facade is usually on the gable end of the roof. Here is the greatest height of the facade appearance. And the counter example, you can see it on the right side, the Minangkabau. Here, the show facade is on the east side of the roof. In this case, a ridge of the roof on the long side is particularly emphasized and raised by upward soaring multiple gable peaks, which has a special symbolism at the identity of the people of the Minangkabau. The exaggerated elevation of the roof on the front side is in some traditional building cultures, the gable of the roof exaggeratedly raised at the front side. The building is thus given particularly imposing appearance. You can see it in the Toraja in Sulawesi, both gable ends extremely strongly upswept. You can see it on the Batak Toba in North Sumatra, also a strong upsweep. And it is clearly recognizable is this upsweep is not due to construction, but it is a design formal reason. And the Toba Batak, the sacking ridge, really constructional problem. And at the Toraja, you can see the roof upsweep has to be achieved by, by additional structurally actual unnecessary support. Like a characteristic and uniquely appearance of traditional settlements of Batak Toba people in North Sumatra and the Toraja people in Sulawesi is created rows of widely projecting soaring roofs. And these roofs dominate the image of the settlement. So the roof shape is not only decisive for the identity of the house, but also for the identity and regional affiliation of settlement. And the decor, you can see it in the example of the Toba Batak. The decoration of the roof area is often a main feature for the appearance of individual buildings. And prominent buildings have an extreme decoration. And up above the building, the gable zone shows the rank of the house. The gable zone often also determines the individual appearance of a certain building. And interesting here is also that the decoration is often applied only at the entrance side. This is usually the front side of the building, the show facade. Here in the Batak Toba area, you see the decoration in gable field of the entrance side, the front side is much more elaborated than at the rear side. And front and rear is here also characterized by different appearance, which is expressed above all in the abundance of the decoration. And decorative elements in the roof area, you can find on the highest point on the roof buffalo heads in Patakaro's Malungun houses. A buffalo head is a symbol for the protection of the house, a symbol for well-being of the inhabitants. Buffalo horns in Minangkabau houses, and the crown of the roofs of Bali on hierarchically higher buildings. The hierarchy of symmetry. Symmetry is a very important feature of prestige in general building. Symmetry is in traditional architecture also a characteristic of beauty. The origin of the word symmetry is the ancient Greek word symmetria, and it is meaning balance, harmonious and beautiful proportions, and equilibrium. And the most buildings in Indonesia, in Indonesian architectural traditions, are axially symmetrical, which means that symmetry is related to one of two main axes. With an increased prestige of building types, an axial symmetry can also develop into a double symmetry. And the picture below, right side, we can see that, for example, in the Karabatak building type. The Batak Karo, to stay there, to continue with them, the traditional Karo Batak dwelling house is characterized by an incredible height of the roof area. In the interior, the headroom to beams is approximately 15%. The height of roof is approximately 85% of the total height. And in the exterior, the substructure is approximately 10%. The wall zone is approximately 10%, and the roof zone is approximately 80% of the total height. Clearly visible in the axonometry drawing, the roof construction here is rather complex. And the hierarchy of the buildings is not only expressed by the height of the roof, but also by the complexity of the roof. The more prominent the house, the more complex is the roof structure. And above the actual roof, another roof is constructed. Is actually a scaled-down model, rumah anjong of a traditional Kara house. And in extreme cases, several of these house models are placed on top of each other on the roof. And you can clearly see the priority of these buildings. The more prominent houses, the more prominent in this case of a village, or the assembly houses, the community houses, the body, as landmarks of the community of the village, are the most prominent examples. And the hierarchy of buildings is also expressed by the double symmetry, the all-round symmetry. And prominent buildings, centered buildings, this is particularly noticeable in the roof zone. Bali, for example, a Balinese compound. A Balinese compound is enclosed by a perimeter wall, consists of several buildings, and these buildings have different functions and they have different rank. And also here, the different rank is expressed by different roof forms. The lowest ranking building, the pigsty, the lean-to roof and overpitched roof, one surface. The next higher rank is the kitchen and the barn, a gable roof, two surfaces, or a hipped roof, foot roof, 2 and 2.5 surfaces. The next higher rank is the family members dwelling, a hipped roof, 4 surfaces. And the next higher rank is the parents' dwelling house, a pyramid roof, 4 surfaces and centered on a pointed roof. And the highest rank is the family temple on a high platform, and either a pyramid roof or multiple pyramid roofs, 8 surfaces. And the system of superimposed roofs culminates in the Balinese temple complex. Simple shrines has, for example, 2 roofs on top of each other. Other higher ranking shrines dedicated to corresponding higher Hindu deities have 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 roofs superimposed. And the more roofs, the higher the rank of the shrines. But such expression of building hierarchies in the type of roof shape is not limited to traditional architecture on the islands of Sumatra and Bali. This principle can is obvious also in other building cultures, e.g. in Europe. And I'll bring here another example from an Indonesian island, is Java. In Java, it is also expressed in traditional architecture, in central Java, that different rank of building types is expressed in different roof shapes. The Panggang Per roof, monopitch, typical of lower ranking building. The Kampung roof, a gable roof, characteristic of simple dwellings in the village, Kampung. The Limasan roof, a hipped roof, typical for dwellings of higher ranking persons in the countryside or for townhouses. And the Chokri roof, a multi-part hipped roof, the highest rank dwelling house in the upper class, and important public buildings. And the Tachig roof, usually a multi-story pyramid roof for religious buildings. The complexity, one face, two faces, four faces, Tokyo, 8 faces, the Tachok with 3 superimposed roof are 12 faces. The symmetry, Pangnakpe, no symmetry, no centrality. Kampung roof, the ridge grade is a single axis of symmetry. Limassol roof, an increased symmetry through shortened ridge, and the Jogger roof, a very short ridge, surrounding ring pitch roof, which is almost symmetrical. Increased centrality, and the Tajik roof, a perfect double symmetry, absolute centering by pyramid shapes. In all these cases, it is clearly recognizable. Complexity and symmetry are essential features that are expressions of hierarchies in traditional architecture. And these principles are not only expressed in structure, but in particular in the shape of the roof. The highest culmination of meaning and centrality, height and slenderness of the roofs of traditional dwellings on Sumba. And also here, the tripartite division of the house into substructure, the animals, living space, sphere of human, and roof zone, sphere of ancestors and ghosts. The court zone of the house with the hearth in the center has a sacred character in Sumba. The living area arranged around of the court zone is a lower rank, lower space. And in the external appearance, the hierarchy of spaces in the house is clearly expressed by the shape of the roof. The higher valence of the central area is shown by the very, very steep roof bar, rising high like a tower. And the lower rank living area has a much flatter, low-ring shaped monopitch. And what about the roof, finally, as a factor of identification? What do you see when you are driving through a town such as Bukit Tinggi in West Sumatra? You see roofs, roofs. And for those who still don't believe that traditional roof shapes are an essential factor in marking regions and ethnic groups, finally, a few pictures of completely crazy objects where the importance of a certain shape of roof is illustrated in an exaggerated way. If you have a building that looks very boring or has an identityless, miserable design, then put a prominent roof on it. And to let people know in which region you are, mount a traditional roof that marks the corresponding region and emphasizes the corresponding culture. Here, Minangkabau. It is incredible what crazy ideas architects have when nothing else springs out the brains. And if you are driving on a road somewhere in Indonesia and you don't know where you are, a gateway will clearly tell you. And even if it has no labeling, the shape of the gate unmistakably shows the region by an attached roof. According to the traditional style of the local architecture, you are either in the region of the Minangkabau, the Patakaro, the Patakatoba, or you are in Java. And if you don't know where you want to have dinner tonight and which dishes are available in which restaurant, the traditional shape of the model roofs mounted above scoreboards and restaurant entrances tells you without a shadow of a doubt. Apparent why popular is Padang food in Minangkabau, but not only in Minangkabau. This is also often found in Java and on other islands. And however, sometimes you can be mistaken. On the bottom right picture, there are Patakaro roofs mounted, but it is a Rumah Makan Islam. And although Muslims are rather in the minority of the Patakaro region, but after all, the restaurant is located in the capital of the Patakaro in Brestad. And very chic is the minimalized sign of a roof in the picture on the right above. Despite the minimalized form, it is immediately recognizable as a traditional Minangkabau roof. And even for more marginal objects, models of traditional roof shapes indicate the corresponding region where the thing is located. Evaru in Bukit Tinggi with a Minangkabau roof model. A container in Persagi with a shrink Batak Karo roof model. And display boards in Java with chocolate roof shapes. And the conclusion of all, in this lecture, I tried to outline characteristics of roof types in various building cultures of the Indonesian archipelago, also in a very, very abridged way. I shortened this lecture down to nearly nothing. What I attempted to show was to demonstrate that the identity of a large number of these building cultures is expressed essentially through the traditional roof shapes. And I wanted to demonstrate that in some of these building cultures, the rank of the building or the residence can also be expressed by certain roof shapes. And at the very end, I would like to ask a question. How can we apply all this knowledge in the future when we are only building houses with flat roofs? Thanks for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Lechner. That is a very interesting lecture, especially on the symbolic elements of roof design as an expression of social identity. And I really like the beautiful images on roofs that you capture in your slides. And personally, I've never been to Indonesia yet to all those places, but it is a very beautiful image on the roof design and houses. So it looks like the topic was timely, and you had presented the material and the new innovations in a way that everyone could understand. And the insightful presentation had given a new dimension in appreciating traditional architecture that can be integrated with the modern society, namely for the benefit of the new generation. So your question, please leave it open. So maybe we can discuss this further at the end of the session when we will look at how to integrate the traditional roof design in modern architecture structures. Because as you can see in a lot of architecture schools, especially among students, they are more interested in designing flat roof slab as their main concern towards looking into modern contemporary design rather than looking into the typical traditional and how to integrate the values, the identity, the culture, the symbolic elements into the modern architecture. So we reserve that question from you first, and we will open up the mind of the audience at the end of the session. So it getting interesting as time goes by. So by now, there's a lot of questions coming in the chat box, especially for Dr. Abida and also for Prof. Lechner. But I will reserve the question first, and we will keep the best for last at the end of this session. And without further ado, I would like also to remind all participants, please type a lot of your questions in the chat box, and the organizer will attend to all your questions at the end of this session. And also, please fill in the attendance link for the second session. It is also being put up by the organizer in the chat box. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the last speaker for today. This is Professor Dr. G.S. Hirohide Kobayashi from Kyoto University, Japan. And Prof. Dr. Kobayashi is also our last speaker. And actually, if you look at the time, we actually ahead of time. Not we have a lot of ample of time, and this looks good actually for this webinar. So we can have a lot of time for question and answer session at the end of this webinar. So let me introduce first Professor Dr. Kobayashi is a professor at the Laboratory of Global Environmental Architecture, Graduate School of Global Environmental Studies, GCGES from Kyoto University. He is an active member in many international associations like the Architectural Institute of Japan, the City Planning Institute of Japan, Japan ICOMOS National Committee, the Japan Society for International Development, and the Japan Association for African Studies. And Professor Dr. Kobayashi is also involved in many research projects relating to the global environmental architecture, which explores the sustainable human living environment. And to understand more in detail on his area of expertise, Professor Dr. Kobayashi will share his topic for today's webinar on the application of body-based units of measurement as indigenous building technique. So please put your hand and give a round of applause to Professor Dr. Kobayashi from Kyoto University. And the floor is yours, Professor. So over to you.
Hi, thank you very much today. So I really appreciate the organizers for the opportunity, good opportunity to me about the webinar series. So today, so my presentation is so let me share my screen. Can you see my slide? Okay. Okay, so my presentation is the application of a body-based unit of measurement as the indigenous building technique. I'm showing today they are not only the Asian indigenous architecture, but also the indigenous architecture in Pacific Islands, where so is my research site. So I'm starting from the reconstruction project of vernacular architecture. Okay, so our research team are researching on the living condition of the rural villages in Asian and the Pacific Island countries. The sustainability of vernacular architecture in modern context is one of our important research topic. So here, Vietnam, Fiji, Thailand, Vanuatu, Japan. So especially in Vietnam, so I have been researching since 2004. It's mostly more than 15 years research work, cooperating with researchers in local universities. And then the vernacular architecture expresses local identity. However, it is disappearing by the modernization and the market economy, even in remote islands. So in the remote villages in Vietnam, so in 2004, around 2004, so they kept the very traditional lifestyle, but now they have motorbikes, they have a mobile phone, they have so many good devices for their life. And the reconstruction project were organized when we met the local people who recognized the importance of their own traditional house in their modern life. So the first reconstruction project is conducted in a local village in central Vietnam. This is the Katu ethnic minorities traditional community house. And then in 2011, so we moved to the Fiji for the reconstruction project. So this is also the traditional wooden architecture in Fiji. And this is the project in southern Thailand. The Moken people's traditional house. The Moken people had to remove the inland by the tsunami disaster in 2004, right? And the project in Vanuatu. And then moving back to Vietnam, so we organize again the Katu traditional house, community house reconstruction project in central Vietnam. And then, so I want to show you briefly the first reconstruction project in central Vietnam in 2007. So the JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, they sponsored our project of support of livelihood and safety in the disaster-prone areas in central Vietnam, which focus on the 3 pilot projects in the Lagoon Village, Plain Village, and the Mountain Village. So in Mountain Village, so the Katu people live there. And then so we started the reconstruction project in that village. So firstly, the purpose of the project is different. So firstly, we try to make the modern house for the evacuation center by the flood disaster. But the village leader and the former village leader look unhappy to have a modern house. And then so they demonstrated to build up their own traditional house. So there is a reason why they had no chance to build their traditional house because of the Vietnam War. Since 1974, at the end of the Vietnam War, they had to relocate to some certain area by the government, and then so no chance to have a traditional house. And then, so by the project team, so we recommended them to start the reconstruction project, working with them. And then, so collection of the wooden material, transportation by the buffalo, and the logging, the processing, and the ceremony for starting the construction. And all of the local people come together for the main structure, and they built up without the nails, using the rope, only ropes, and the bamboo, and then the roofing. And they have very high technique to make a unit of the roof, and then they slide them up to the roofing part. And they have also the high technique to weaving the bamboo screen like this. And then finally, the one elder person make the ornament on the top of the roof. And the elderly people also put the central pillar finally, and then so make completion ceremony. So in the projects, we pay, it costed only 3,000 USD because by the community corporation, so they don't exchange money. They just contribute the labor. But we had to pay the 3,000 USD. The most of the money used for the buffalo for the sacrifice ceremony. Yeah. And then, so in these reconstruction project, so I found the 3 local resources for vernacular architecture. The first resources is of course, the natural material. They use a lot of natural materials. And the second one is the community cooperation. So I want to call it the human resources. All of the villagers, they work together without money, yeah, for the construction. And the last resource is indigenous knowledge. So as I told you, they didn't use any nails for the connection, and they use a very high technique for the exterior wall and the roofing. And then also today's topic, the design method by the body-based unit of measurement, also one of the indigenous knowledge. And then, so I understand the vernacular architecture can be constructed and maintained by 3 elements of natural material, community cooperation, and indigenous knowledge. And each of 3 elements is belonging to natural resources, human resources, and intellectual resources. These 3 resources are interacted each other. For example, a community gets the beneficence from the surrounding forest and field. And the local knowledge and technology are transferred, and the forest resources are managed for the sustainable use by local knowledge. So these interaction is quite important in a vernacular architecture, I think. And overviewing three local resources, they exist in the local nature, local society, and the local culture, sometimes to be local environment. So thus, the sustainability of vernacular architecture deeply depend on the local environment in its area. So this is my understanding of the vernacular architecture and these supporting elements. And then, as I told you, the indigenous design method is a kind of the intellectual resources. Yes. So this is my main topic in this presentation. I asked to the village leader. So that was a very simple question to him. So I wonder how they decide the length of the eaves here. And the village leader explained it's decided by from here to here. Yeah. So in a local language, he explained to Chalan to village. It means from shoulder to leg. So this was the starting point of the researching the body-based unit of measurement. And then so I invited the 5 elderly villagers to understand more the body-based unit used by them. And then see the explanation by the elderly from center of the body to the tip of the hand. Yeah, he said salon. Yeah. So it was very difficult to collect the information from the villagers because so they didn't have
Recording in progress.
so show the same design method by using a body. And then finally, I found the 17 body units from here to here. And there are 7 arm-based unit, 10 hand-based unit. And they have many kind of unit and then apply them to the construction of the house. So this is the village. We did the reconstruction project, the 2 other villages, and then the different ethnic living just near 2 people. So as you see this figure, so we can find the very, very similar units, but some of them they're called differently. But so we found so mostly the same idea of the body-based unit in the Katu people and the surrounding village people. And so it is also interesting. They have the so some relationship between some units. They explain the 1 achen equal to 4 cut. equal to 8 chada. You understand? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7. So I found the same idea in Japanese traditional house, primitive house. So it's very interesting, but of course, we don't know how they transfer this information to different place to the another place. So we take the measurement survey of the community house, and then so we understand more. So how they apply the unit to the actual building. And then so they use the Achen plus some other units, depending on the size of a pillar, depending on the size of the uh, house, they explained. And the section planning also applied by unit. For example, the height, floor height is applied by A1 plus A6. And then the height from floor to beam is A1 plus A6 as well. And then the full height of the house is 4 times of A1, like this. So they, of course, they don't use the drawing paper. So they just put all of the information in their head and the body. And so when they decide the size of material components, so they also use the units. For example, for the central pillar, need the 6 times of H1 for the round part, round legs of the pillar. And then so many pillar, the standing around is also the 4 times of H4. And the round length of the roof beam is the H1 plus H4. Yeah. So they exactly remember the how they use the unit. And so it was a very interesting information for me in Vietnam. And then so when we have the project in Fiji, so I tried to take an interview to the local people for the same technique. And they had the same one, but only 7 kind of unit in Fiji. And in Thailand, they also have a 7 kind of unit. And in Vanuatu, so it's a very, very simple traditional house. And so they just use the one kind of step. One step is the nearly 90 centimeters to decide the floor area. The 3 steps by 5 steps is necessary for the house. And the height planning, so they use their body height and the height of the raised hand. It is very, very simple. So I had the opportunity to do the field work in Burkina Faso, West Africa. This was the different type of the house, well, which is different from the wooden culture, wooden house in Asian countries. But I was so curious to know they use the body unit or not. So how do you think about this? Yeah, they also use the unit. Yeah, you remember the interview video in Vietnam? So he used the same gesture from center of the body to the tip of the hand. So this side, this length is equal to 1 step, he explained. Yeah, floor area decided by the steps like this. But the height planning is different. So they use the Adobe Brick. So they decide the height by the, so how many layer of Adobe Brick or how many layer of the motherboard. So this is a very intangible information and sometimes difficult to clarify exactly the information of the building technique, but so they have a very, very much knowledge about that in many places in the world. So I want to conclude the significance of the research on body-based unit of measurement. I want to emphasize the documentation and investigation as quite important. About the documentation, the indigenous building technique applying a body-based unit of measurement should be documented because it is usually transferred by the opportunity of construction, which is very rare in our modern life. So the all of the construction technique transfer by the opportunity of the construction. So, but the vernacular architecture is quite difficult to keep for them. So, but the elderly people is now the 70 years old, middle 70, 80 years old. Thinking about the 10 years later, this of information definitely disappearing. Yeah. So that's why, so that this kind of information should be documented by the researchers, I think. And also the other researchers, so indigenous building technique should be investigated because it may be linked in all of the areas where we can building culture. We can find out so many similarities. So how to apply the unit, body-based unit to the construction. So that's why, so this is a very interesting topic. This is a research kind of the building culture, wooden culture. So yes, so we should continue to do the research about this topic. Thank you very much. So this is my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kobayashi. Thank you again. Your presentation actually had drawn the audience in and held their attention. And there's a lot of questions coming in actually. And if it actually triggers an interest in body units, anthropometrics calculations that actually can benefit with new insights in appreciating the anthropometrics of traditional architecture. So it will be much more interesting if this study can actually be extended further and look into the application of the measurement and how it can be applied actually in the modern housing construction, especially in Asian countries. So it's a very good presentation, Professor Kobayashi, and gave us a new kind of an insight into new things that we can venture in the future. So now is actually the session that all of us have been waiting for, which is the Q&A session. And I know all of you has a lot of questions to ask our three main speakers today. So, but I will go first and foremost with the questions. The first question from Ibu Primi Artinigrum for Dr. Abida. And actually, it is a three-in-one question. So, Dr. Abida, I hope you can get ready with the first question from Ibu Primi. So the first question is that is there any of Kajang Luar village? And if it is the difference between the Kajang Dalam and the Kajang Luar village? And are there any possibility that this Kajang Dalam can be influenced by the new culture in the future? I hope Dr. Abida, you can answer a question from Ibu Primi.
Thank you, Professor Elisa. I will answer the question. Kajian dalam and kajian luar is the same price, but kajian dalam still follow the all regulation customs and Kajang luar going to modern life. Example, in Kajang dalam didn't use don't use the electricity, and we cannot use the shoes, sandal, and also we have to use in the black color, the black clothes, all clothes. And they are nothing color clothes in over there, and in the other in the Kajang luar going to is also using already use the electricity. Modern life and modern material, watching TV, but in Kajang dalam nothing TV because nothing electricity. I think what different there.
Is that all from you, Dr. Abida?
Yeah.
Is that all the answers from you, Dr. Abida, or you want to add on more to the question on Kajang Dalam?
Yeah, Kajang dalam is also follow all regulation use the black warehouse is using the local material, not modern material.
Okay.
Of regional and social identities. But according to me, roof types is not an identity as regional and social because the roof only serve for the purposes of the influence of the water such as heat, rain, wind, and so on. In addition, the roof also affect the beauty of a building so that it looks attractive and perfect for making. Thus, according to me, the choice of roofing is adaptive to the climate in which we are located. Yeah, taking into account available and affordable cost and easily available and quality materials. The roof model cannot be claimed by the local community because the roof model is general and everyone uses. For example, the flat roof models, gable roof models, tower roof, pyramid models, and Persian present models, or combined gable and present models. So I think that this model is general and everyone uses so that roof types is not an identity, regional and social according to me. I think it's my thinking about roof types. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ayudin. I hope Prof. Eric, would you like to respond to Pak Ayudin's question?
Yes, of course. The connection was not as good. I hope I understood everything. You mean that the modern roof, of course, is flat roof. Yeah, all roofs now are the same, more or less. Is it right? Okay. Yeah. About because of the bad connection, I understood, for example, that it is nearly not affordable to build a roof like the Toraja or the Toraja or the Batacaro and so on. Yeah? In fact, all the the houses, or nearly all the houses of the Batacaro, with their really huge roofs, yeah, with their oversized roofs, except in some cases of Linga, for example, except in some villages, most of the houses are gone now because it is really affordable. It is really not It is really costly to keep these houses in shape. And it is more costly, of course, to build new houses in this way. And this is really a pity because the identification is lost. Uh, what I can give you an example. We had some several years ago, we had a project on Mias Island, yeah, and we asked the people, what do you prefer to live in which house? In a modern house, which is a normal concrete house with a flat roof or a tin roof, or do you want to live in a traditional house? And nearly all the people told us, yes, I want to live in a traditional house. And the next question was, when you want to build a house for yourself, what do you want to build a house? And nearly all people said, a modern house. And it, see, and when you ask the people, why do you want to build a modern house if you want to live in a traditional house? The answer was, because it is too expensive to build a traditional house. And our future, of course, will be will depend on factors. Yeah? The problem is that the global architecture is you can see it all over the world. You can see it in America, in Africa. You can see it in Australia and Asia, in Europe. In Central Europe, we have the same problem. If you go to the countryside, yeah, the modern some people now they build again roofs, traditional roofs. It's interesting, yeah, but in several regions not. And what we have with our COVID-19 problem, that we cannot travel around. And I told one of my colleagues, maybe in future you must not travel around. You can see all over the world the same building types. Yeah, and it is a pity. But we are here in this webinar. We cannot alter this future. It is not possible, and it is more or less it is lost. Try to keep some of the old buildings, that the people know what their ancestors have done, and what we can do. For example, your Kobayashi, your lecture about the measurement. Yeah, that is what we can apply to an architecture. There is nearly no problem in a way. Yeah, but on the roofs, this is really a problem. I hope most of your answers are, most of the questions are answered.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Lechner. To continue on with that, the discussion, especially on the application in the modern context, and you were mentioning about the idea that the measurement it's really actually can be easily applied in the modern housing. And maybe I would like to hear the views, and also the participants also would like to hear the views from Prof. Kobayashi, who is an expert in dealing with these measurement units. So, Prof. Kobayashi, would you like to respond to Prof. Eric's comments in terms of application of measurements in modern housing, and what can be learned from the traditional to apply it in the modern context? So, can I have Prof. Kobayashi?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so Professor Eric's comment is very interesting. So I found that in terms of the body-based unit of measurement, so I found that it applied sometimes to the modern house as well, because the body is the same, even in a traditional house and the modern house. So they need to have enough space for living, right? So this is not no problem to choose the traditional or modern one. For example, so the local people decide the size of the door for the entrance, and they use the big bowl for cooking. So this is the standard to decide the size of the door, right? So this is a kind of a body-based unit. And then, so I think it's possible, but I'm always afraid the application of the body, the information of a body-based unit possibly disappearing. For especially for the younger generation, because they always use a ruler, they always use the meta module, yeah. So the information is changing, but I think for the housing design, the body-based unit is quite reasonable. Yeah, so that's why I want them to keep such a traditional knowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
All right.
okay.
Good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And to extend on that, there is a question actually from Iburia Wikantari. And her question is that to you, in terms of human resources, how is the hierarchy and role distribution among the people involved in the construction process that you described in your slide earlier? And whose body is commonly used as basis of measurement in found in your research of the anthropometric system? So I hope you can answer that, Prof. Kobayashi, for Iburia Wikantari. Prof. Kobayashi, maybe you need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Hi. Thank you for your question. So I asked the same question to the local people whose body are used for the construction. And they answered they use the body which looking very healthy, not the size, because they always need a lucky, yeah. So lucky charm. So that's why. So it's also the very interesting, but actually they use the body which show the average size in the village. And I ask again to the local people, so if the small body or big body used for the construction, what's happened? And then they answered, the small body, small people need the small house. Big people need just a big house. So that's why the linkage between the body size and the housing size is very reasonable. They explained. Yeah, so this is out of my expectation, but it was very interesting.
Yeah. It's very interesting because when the traditional people compared the body size actually. So yeah, that's a very good finding, Prof. Kobayashi. Okay, yeah. To continue on, I would like to open this session to any live question from the audience to make this session more livelier. So, are there any live question from the audience? Please raise up your hands and just unmute your mic, and you can give your question to all the three speakers. So, are there any live question from the audience? Perhaps I need the help from the organizers. If not, I'll carry on to the question from the chat box while waiting for the live question. Okay, the next following question is actually for Dr. Andi Abida. And this is a person who are very interested, especially in the Kajang house. So, are there any difference in determining the location of the stairs, the direction of the staircases, and the number of steps in the traditional Bugis Sopeng and Kajang dalam houses? And are there any meanings behind it all? I hope Dr. Abida, can you answer?
Yeah, thank you. I will answer about the question. In the Kajang house location, stairs in the landed in main house, but in the Bugis, the stair landed in the Lego. Maybe is a veranda, like veranda, not direct in main house, but in the Kajang, number of steps of the halls only 7 and 9 steps of ladder of stairs. But in the Bugis, number of stairs is sign of level social status because the number of stairs in the Bugis 7, 9, 11, and 13. Because 7, 9, and 11 is used by commoner people and 13 for noble people. But in the Kajang, all the same, the same the same design, the same house, the same ladder, the same number. Only two type number of step. But in the Sopeng, Bugis Sopeng is so many. Depend the level social status. I think my question. I think my answer.
Yep. I think I hope that answers the question to the person who asking the question. I hope that's fine. The answer from Dr. Abida, and relating to the question and to the answers from the audience, also from Dr. Andi Abida, is talking about the idea of symbolism or cosmology. So this is a question that addressed to Prof. Lechner from Mitten, and he wants to know about how the human body compared to a house, and how is the relationship with the traditional belief, especially in cosmology, especially in designing the roof design. So perhaps maybe Prof. Eric, you can explain detail on that.
Yeah, the comparison between the body, human body, and the house. Yeah, it is really interesting. I found many literature articles about it, and that the human body is as compared to the house is really is an interesting thing, and the roof on the highest top. If you're the highest point of a thing, yeah, is nearly always the most important. And if for example, if you see on the sacred building, yeah, what is on the highest top of the mosque, yeah, it is the sign of Muslim. What is the highest top? For example, I mean, on Kabao, roofs on these buffalo horns. It is really the same sign like the mosque. What is the highest thing on a Christian church? It is the cross, the Christian cross. And so the highest thing is the most important. And the different, I think the question was about the different shapes. The different shapes of the roof is very interesting thing. I saw it nowhere in the world in this exaggerated way, that nearly each ethnic group has its own roof shape. It's very interesting, yeah? And this is a factor of identity. It is not only what will have the body of the house, the wall zone of the house, and of course there are differences, but they are not so not so extreme like the shape of the roof. And so for me, the shape of the roof, this roof zone, was interesting that creates identity. And what we need in architecture, we need to create identity for the persons who live in, identity for the region, identity for the ethnic group. And I think you may have the same same mind as me. I feel home when I see architecture of my hometown, for example. Yeah, it is not only the roof, of course. Yeah, the other things also, but you can feel at home. You can feel well-being if you are in your home region, and the home region should have an identity. And when, for example, when I go to some parts of Vienna in Austria, yeah, some new built parts, yeah, and I look around, and when I go to Jakarta, for example, and I look around, it is the same. maybe it's so. I don't like Jakarta really very much, but in the first time when the last time when I was in Jakarta, when I went by taxi from the airport to the city, and I looked out of the window and I thought, oh, that's like the outports of Vienna. It's really the same, yeah, high-rise building and red roofs, of course. But it is not really the home feeling, yeah. And yeah, I live in a very, very old house, 120 years old, and this house is really in the style of Central Austria, yeah, yeah, Eastern Austria area, and so I like it very much. And my house has also a very, very complicated and really fond of roofs when I wrote this presentation, and I will go on with roofs. And maybe I'm the one of the last one who can write about roofs, because in the future, as I told you, we will not have any roofs visible. What is the great advantage of the flat roofs is that you have additional area, especially in town areas. Yeah, you have not very much green areas, and I think it is really a waste if you have a flat roof which is not usable. Just a flat roof with stones on it. Nobody can enter the flat. Make flat roofs really usable. Make flat roofs for the as green rooms, for example, that children, for example, can play in the middle of the town, completely secure, not affected by traffic. And this is the advantage of flat roof. And for the identification, you must find another things that, because the roof is gone, that you can identificate the region, the belonging of the architecture to the people who live there.
Okay. I think that's a very good explanation from Prof. Lechner regarding about the role and the meaning of identity. But the big question here is that the emerging, or what you call that, between two different sort of cultures, where you have the traditional and when you have the modern comes in, and there's a clash in terms of understanding and how can these two cultures merge together. And I think you're giving the example in Austria where you are. I think that's a kind of a feeling, or what we call the phenomena, that most of us are actually in the same state, actually, whether I'm in Malaysia, whether you in Vienna, or maybe Prof. Kobayashi in Japan, or also in Indonesia. So, and this relate to the next question, actually, which is from Mithan, who are interested to know how does Japan is a well-developed country, especially in Asia, and how do you maintain this traditional architecture and merging between the modernism and also the traditional architecture in Japan. So I hope Prof. Kobayashi, would you like to respond to question from Mithan?
Okay, thank you for your question. Regarding the traditional architecture in Japan, right? Oh, of course, the building of the Buddhist temple and the shrine is very special to be conserved by the government or the very, very public organization. But in terms of the traditional architecture, like a folk housing, the such housing in a rural area, it's very, very unhopeful. And so all of us now living based on the money, market economy. Yeah, so we have to pay the money for everything. But I already show you the example of the vernacular architecture reconstruction project. The all of local people contributed the labor without money. Yeah, this is a very, very surprising event in the modern context, right? So for example, about the traditional folk housing in Japan, we have to pay a lot of money for replacing the roof. But of course, in the past, all of villagers contribute the labor for replacing the researching. So that's why, so we had already changed in our modern life. So that's why it's very, very difficult. Yeah. And then, so maybe when you come to Japan to visit in a rural area, you can see the such the housing covered by metal roof, which means the very difficult to change the such the material without any cooperation of villagers. Yeah, but yeah, this kind of the folk housing with the metal roof also disappearing in near future, I think. Yeah, yeah.
So
So this is my answer about the
yeah,
question. Okay.
yeah, that's the challenge actually, especially in developed countries, isn't it? So we should be in some state of balancing things in between actually, and to find that balance, we need to have knowledge, we need to have research, we need to have proper education, especially to train the young ones, especially the Gen Z generations. They
Yeah.
are the tablet generations, they are the Instagram generations and Facebook generations, especially more towards on the information technology side rather than what you call that, preserving and appreciating the tradition and the culture. Okay,
You
that
are right. You are
yeah,
right, I think. Because so, so Japan is a developed country, but it's now declining very
yeah,
much. So, and then so many young generation move from city area to the rural area,
hmm,
and then so reconstruct their lifestyle.
yeah, hmm,
This is something like a trend or a movement. So if we connect this movement to the conservation of traditional housing, so I think it might be a little bit potential to
yeah.
keep the local culture, including the traditional folk housing.
Yeah, that I think that's also true, Prof. Hirohide, because now the biggest challenge is not only about the maturity or about the knowledge among the new generation, but the challenge is also in terms of the economic stability. Because I think there's a question from Dewey Eva to both of you, which is to Prof. Kobayashi and also to Prof. Lechner, is regarding about when you build the traditional houses, the materials are very expensive nowadays, especially if you talk about timber. So the most what you call that, easy resources that they can use for building construction is usually like steel and glass. That is what available in the market nowadays when we're talking about new technology and development. So how do you both, who are actually the one who strive to preserve these kind of traditional values, can give some direction of approach in talking about materiality, in trying to visualize or showing this traditional architecture in the modern context? So maybe
Mm.
I'll start with Prof. Kobayashi first, and then we move on to Prof. Lechner, and also some views from Dr. Abida. How are we going to what you call that, overcome this problem? And I think this is a critical problem nowadays.
Mm.
So Prof. Kobayashi, you first.
Okay, so as I told you, the also the younger generation thinking the differently compared with the people working in 1960s and 70s. Yeah, so the young generation don't believe the uh, market economy or money can help them. Yeah, completely. So they have the living with the market economy in a half, and another half is they are living based on the another value. Another value means so maybe the rural life, and so maybe finding in a rural area. Yeah, so sometimes the local culture, local technology, existing something in a rural area. Yeah, it's I think more valuable for them. Yeah, so there are many TV program showing the rural life and the lifestyle in the local housing or something. So I think, yeah, it's gradually changing. So maybe the most of the people outside of Japan. Okay, so Japan is established developed country, but I don't believe so. The life in the city area in Japan is getting very difficult. Yeah, so that's why so now we are changing. Yeah, very much.
Okay. So
Mm.
I hope that there will be much changing in the future to come, especially on concerning about these traditional architectural values.
Mm.
So maybe I would like to pass it over also to Prof. Lechner. Would you like to add on to this? What is your views and your opinion in terms of encountering this material, economic, and things like that, and preserving the traditional architecture?
Yeah, the situation is completely different from Indonesia and Central Europe, especially Austria. In Austria, we have much more forest, much more wood than we can use. Yeah, it is incredible, incredible. If you can see it on, for example, on Google Maps or so on, yeah, or on Google Earth, just have a view on Austria. It is incredible. It is forest, 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 forest. We have so much wood, yeah? And we must export the wood because we die in our forest because of forest. And so the material of wood, it is not a problem. But what has completely changed from pre-modern times to modern times, it is the situation of material and work performance, manpower. Yeah, in former times, manpower, work performance, it was so cheap. It was really cheap. What was expensive was the material. And in our times, what is expensive is the manpower, is the work performance. The material, if you have concrete, for example, the cheapest material you ever had in, I think, in the whole history of man, yeah, the whole history of building. Yeah? And so it is not really affordable. In former times, it was not affordable to have a house, for most people, to have a house with good materials. Yeah, we saw it in the rural vicinity in Austria, and now I'm a running project about historic architecture in the eastern parts of Austria. And there was a problem. The normal people living on the countryside, they had no good building material. Yeah, but the manpower was nothing. It cost. And so also in Asia, if you see a traditional village, the building of a house, yeah, we heard it before. The building of a house, it is not it's no cost because the people built the house in many countries and in former times without earning money for that. Yeah, for example, a house if for public use is made by the organization of the village, also is made up by the organization maybe of towns in very long former times. And now it is cost a lot of money. And so you have uh, really not costable materials, but power, cost of manpower. And so architecture must change. It must change. And it is a wrong thing to think that tradition is the right thing. Traditionalism is nonsense. Yeah. No, tradition means to go to build your houses in the situation of the time, in the situation of the epoch. And so if the situation has changed, also architecture must change. Yeah, it is in some terms it's a pity, yeah, but it would be completely wrong to think that we should build like 100 years before.
I think, yeah, that's good. I think I'm agreeing on you because when we look at the essence of traditional, we have to understand it's not like a metaphoric kind of an expression that we direct interpret the thing. So maybe it would like better if not a direct imitation, but rather learn the essence and
Yeah.
then bring it into the modern context.
Yes.
So this is
Mhm.
what have been done by a lot of what you call that the approach of critical regionalism kind of an approach, modern regionalism of approach, that you're maintaining the essence of the traditional, but you bring it into the modern context using the contemporary materials. But still, the soul is still there in terms of showcasing the traditional architecture. So this is actually a big challenge, especially in training the new architects, the young generations, especially the students in architecture school, because they do not have the good understanding of the knowledge or the background of the traditional architecture. Okay, so I think that's we are getting much heated here in terms of discussion about how to bring traditional into the contemporary architecture. And thank you so much, Prof. Lechner. So I also would like to open and had and listen to opinion from Dr. Abida. What is her views next in terms of the situation in Indonesia, and how does the Indonesian government or maybe education respond to this in merging these two different cultures from the tradition and also in the modern situation. So I hope Dr. Abida, would you like to respond to that in terms of the
Thank you,
Indonesian?
Professor Alicia.
Yeah.
Before I will talk young generation. Me also, before I do research the traditional host, I didn't understand. But before I first interest about the traditional host, where the Professor Hirohide sent me a paper a few years ago before I take my doctoral study in TUIN. And then I think maybe in Indonesia also the same method to traditional host. This is the first I interest to traditional host because before I didn't understand, I didn't interest. But about this time in Indonesia, young generation, I think uh, don't understand about the so many young generation don't understand about traditional host and prefer build traditional host because traditional host very expensive than modern house. And also need so many wood. And this time nothing wood in the forest, I think. No, so no wood again. And then maybe to preserve the traditional house, maybe use the modern material, but using the old element, the method, the form, the same form, the same element, the same signage, the same ornament, but using a modern material like stone and but the form is the same. I think this is the way to preserve model traditional house because no people, no young people interest build the traditional house.
Okay. All right, Dr. Abida, that's a very clear picture. What's happening in Indonesia is also the same situation happening in Malaysia, and I
Yeah.
think in Southeast Asian country you're also having the same kind of problem. So there is actually one interesting question because when we look into traditional house, the key essence of this traditional house is talking about ornamentation. And on when you talk about ornamentation, it's always relating to culture because it symbolizes the religious belief, the social status of the homeowners, and things like that. So when we look at this ornamentation, and when the modern architecture comes in during the modernist era, all of these aesthetic values, looking into indication of ornaments, is totally gone because modernism really believe in talking about form follows function, where functionality, minimalism comes into place. So there is another tricky part here is also not talking about materiality, not talking about economic, but also in terms of maintaining the ornamentation values and how to bring this ornament into the modern context, especially in interpreting it into the modern housing schemes. So maybe this is a question actually from Ibu Ria, if not mistaken. So I would like to maybe Dr. Abida, would you like to respond first? And then we can move on to the other two speakers. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ria. Dr. Ria, I will answer. The element in the modern house, I think in no people follow the apply the material the ornamentation in modern house like Anjong and maybe in the other, but some few people apply in the interior ornamentation ornamentation interior home in the modern house, but in the exterior house, not very difficult to find it because the houses the people prefer to the a simple house, minimalist and modern house, modern material maybe, but the interior so many people using I think in Indonesia.
Yeah, yeah. I think most of architects try to find the what you call that the easiest way of interpreting it using the floor plan layout, the spatial organization, and adapted it into the modern houses like the rumah ibu, the rumah kelek anak or dapur. When we have that
Rumah induk, yeah.
yeah, in Malaysia. So thank you so much, Ibu Abida. So I would like to extend this question also from the perception of Prof. Lechner, because you are living in the West. So how does the I know even you talk about Vienna, they must have their own traditional houses, and there will be a lot of ornaments in these traditional houses. So how does this Western or European people applied it into the modern housing while still maintaining the value of ornamentation? So would you like to respond to that, Prof. Lechner?
Yeah, of course, yeah. It is nearly the same. It is not nearly. It is the same as all over the world. In modern architecture, decoration is, yeah, not. And I hope you know our Austrian architect Adolf Loos, who wrote an article, a short article, but a very famous article. It is called Ornament und Verbrechen in English, ornamentation and criminal. Yeah, and if you, in most cases, the this is interpreted as ornamentation is a criminal, is a crime, but it is not the title and it is not the content. It is called definitively ornament and crime, not ornament is crime. And there's a big difference. And please read this article very, very intense. And then you see what Adolf Loos, what really came into his mind. Ornamentation, decoration is too expensive. And if you build a modern house, this expense should go to other things. Yeah, for example, to larger rooms or anything. Yeah, and always, the same case, like the material, yeah, is like it is in the ornamentation, is in the decoration, because decoration nowadays is too expensive because of manpower, because of the expense of doing things for hand forming elements. Yeah, and if you have decoration elements which are industrially built, yeah, industrially produced, this is kitsch, of course. Yeah, I think decoration and ornamentation should be done by hand, should be handmade. But exactly this is what is the cost is too expensive. Yeah, and so can we afford ornamentation, or should we put our money for building a house in other things in modern architecture? And so we cannot change this relation of manpower and material. Yeah, we cannot change it now. I think the change is not possible also in future. So I think it is, if you have money enough, yeah, make it. But if you have not money enough, then use no decoration. Because please don't use any industrial produced decoration. It is really a kitsch, outside or inside, the same. And so, yeah, unsolvable problem for me.
Yeah, because if you don't properly actually understand ornamentation and putting it at the wrong place, it will become a pastiche kind of an architecture. So pastiche is not good because you are talking about only the exterior, like you're putting makeup on your face, but you do not show your real face actually to the people, to the culture, and to the environment. Yeah, I'm agreeing on that. So maybe I would like to hear also the views from Prof. Kobayashi himself in terms of ornamentation and how does the application in the Japanese context. And when you talk about ornamentation, there's also relating to the what you call it, anthropometrics, and talking about body units is also applied in ornamentation. Maybe would you like to respond with that, Prof. Kobayashi?
Mhm. So ornamentation is not a good question to me actually. So in Japan, so maybe you may know we like a simple design and minimum design traditionally, except so some Buddhist temple. But even in the Buddhist temple, after Japanizing Buddhist temple, it's looking simpler than the original Buddhist temple coming from China or Korea.
Recording in progress.
The ornamentation is not good question to me, but of course, as Professor Eric explained, the ornamentation is a lot of money, yeah, even in Japan. So, yeah, this is a very, very negative meaning, negative approach to omit the ornamentation.
Questions here and there, because if I give all the question to the speakers, it will be very lengthy, and we only have about 15 to 10 minutes more if this session, if the host really allow me to continue on. Okay, that's one question actually for Prof. Lechner from Dr. Zairin. His question is about the three spheres are often used in the meaning of vernacular houses in Indonesia and in Asia region, but they are not even found in other region, which is in Europe or America. So his question is it because of culture, or is it because of religion, or is it because of other aspects and factors? So perhaps, Prof. Lechner, would you like to answer and respond to Dr. Zairin's question from Untan?
Yes, of course. But sorry, I didn't understand the first word because there was a cut in my computer.
Okay,
just the first word.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. The three spheres are often used in the meaning of vernacular houses.
The three what?
Three spheres.
Three spheres, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
the three spheres.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. The three spheres. Yeah, the three spheres. It is really, it is not limited, of course, to East or Southeast Asia, but in this really in these regions, three spheres bipartite of the house, it is really obvious. Yeah, it is really obvious. And I think maybe it comes from religion. In religion, it is expressed in a very, very concrete way. If you see, for example, Borobudur in Java, it is the largest Buddhist complex in the world, and, and it is more than 1,000 years. Very interesting. In this case, you have these three spheres in the body of what is the body of the building. You have the three spheres in the pictures, in the images of the different parts. And so these old religions, they're the same to Hindus. Yeah, these old religions, I think they had a great, a great thing for building vernacular architecture, and especially in the humid tropical area. Most of the buildings are away from the muddy earth. Yeah? And I never understood why it is not the same in Java, for example. Yeah, it's really for me it's not understandable because why the Javanese building types are completely different. They stand really more or less on the ground. Yeah, but there is no difference in humidity. Yeah, but compared to other traditional buildings on Sumatra and other islands, and maybe nearly all other Indonesian islands, it's really interesting. But if you see the old pictures and Javanese temples, there are pictures of houses, of vernacular houses, of traditional houses, and you see that these buildings also stand on piles or stand on post and beams construction. That means that in any time it changed. It changed, and the wall zone, the living area, sunk down to the ground. It is very interesting, yeah. And really, I don't know why it is just in Java. And if you have the situation in other regions, Bali, for example, in Bali the houses stand on platforms, yeah, not very high, but on platforms. But of course, in the cities, yeah, in the towns, they do not stand on platforms. And I have had this first image when I've been several times to Bali. When I was first in Bali, yeah, and I came from the airport and went through the city. There was just a really thunderstorm with a big amount of rain, and all the people stood on the border of the house to the street and keeping the rain out, keeping the rain out. If you have the same situation on other islands, on traditional architecture, this is also different to modern architecture, because modern architecture, the buildings and on the ground, yeah, nobody interested on this because you live 2 meters above the rain flow, above the mud. But it is really, as I can repeat, it is really a special thing to Indonesia, to Southeast Asia, and that these buildings mostly stand, vernacular buildings mostly stand on these high raised piles or post and beam constructions.
Yep. I think I'm agreeing with you, Prof. Eric, because to me, I think the audience also and most of who are the fans of traditional architecture, especially the vernacular architecture, will always say that traditional architecture, the beauty part of it is about the enhancement in terms of a very clear understanding about the spirit of time and spirit of place, like bringing in the genius loci of the place to life
Mhm.
and to emerge back the soul of genius loci. So and how does the architecture responds to the climate, to the existing context, the landscape. That's the beauty part of traditional architecture, where the modernism architecture really missed into looking into it that into detail. Yep. Okay. That's very good views from you, Prof. Eric. So I can see one hand is raising up, and I think it's from Ibu Rafika. So finally, we have a live question. So Ibu Rafika, can I please ask the host to the unmute Ibu Rafika so she can ask the question directly to the speakers. Ibu Rafika, may we hear your question to the three speakers today? Ibu Rafika, are you here? Mhm. Maybe the organizer can help me to identify Ibu Rafika because I saw her raising up her hand. Okay, she's not responding. Okay, never mind. While waiting for her to give her the question, I also like to move on to another question. And this one is actually to Dr. Abida. So, what is the strongest different feature between Kajang and Bugis architecture? So, this is more talking about ethnic architecture, the Bugis ethnic architecture.
Could you repeat your question?
What is the strongest different feature between Kajang and Bugis architecture?
The Kajang architecture, maybe the Kajang dalam. This is my Kajang dalam, not Kajang luar. Kajang luar is going to modern, but Kajang dalam is still preserve the maintain their culture, tradition, and all tradition, culture, and but in Bugis actually in Sopeng, the community going to modern because before also in colonial Dutch colonial coming in the my island in the my village, they are going to change the form of Bugis house. And then after in the Indonesia independent, many majority the community going to back use the original form Bugis traditional Bugis house, but not using element again because they are no understand about element and ornament. The different in Kajang and in Bugis, Bugis open to modern, but in Kajang dalam no.
So, which means there's a very clear what you call that differences between the Bugis and also from the Kajang architecture in the terms of the structures and elements, isn't it, Dr. Abida?
The element, the Kajang dalam is very simple, nothing ornament, but element is very simple. But it Bugis so much because element is also as the symbol, the signage of level social status. But in Kajang, no, all home the same, nothing different level over there.
Okay. All right. I hope that's clear the question actually from Ibu Ria, if not mistaken, asking about the question of the difference to Dr. Abida. Thank you, Dr. Abida, for the answer. Okay. I'm still waiting for all the audience. If you have any questions, please raise up your hand. And please also fill in the attendance Google form here at the chat box. That is for the third session. And just a quick reminder, if you have any question, please type it in the chat box and the host will attend to you. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. And this is actually for Prof. Kobayaki. Okay. Uh, Kobayashi. And the question is that can vernacular architecture be resilient for now when we consider the natural resources, which is timber?
Okay. Yeah, the material is always very difficult for the reconstruction project as well as the usual construction in the rural area. For example, in Vietnam, yes, all of the wood material is prohibited to get by the local people. So because of the damage of Vietnam War, yeah, the very precious wooden material is a very few in the forest, and then but the local people illegally get the material all the time. So that's why the government strictly prohibit the cutting the precious trees. So that's why for the reconstruction projects, we negotiated the long time with the local government to get the material. But yeah, so material is always a problem. So that's why in the village, Vietnamese village for the reconstruction project, firstly, the young generation emphasize the pillar should be concrete. Pillar should be concrete because it's difficult to get the natural material, as well as the looking, they always emphasize the looking very poor to use a natural material. So this is a very typical response from the young generation in Vietnam. Concrete, steel material, looking very rich, modernized, in the traditional house, looking very poor. Yeah, they always explain. But actually, the natural material, the precious wooden material is um, more expensive than the concrete and the steel material actually. So it is something like a contradiction, yeah, to decide the material for the house.
Yeah. I think that's a good statement because if you look at organic architecture by Frank Lloyd Wright, the idea is always talk about the truth of the materiality will always bring one closer to God or whoever that you believe in, isn't it? The creation. So that's why if you look at organic architecture, even though it's in the modernist era, but still the element of traditional and how it brings it to the modern context by Frank Lloyd Wright. I always talk to I always feel that Frank Lloyd Wright is the good master builder, one of the examples that maybe we, the new generation, should learn into it. And how does Frank Lloyd Wright did the approach of organic architecture in the modern context? So this is a very good discussion, and I'm happy to get to know the three panels here today, and really an expert in terms of traditional architecture. So actually, if we look at the time now, it's 4:40 in Malaysia. I'm not. I think in Indonesia it's 3:40, so we only have about 5 or 10 minutes left. So maybe we need to conclude the session if that's what the host wants. So they said need to maintain the time up until before 5. So I'll try to do that 5 Indonesian time. So since Prof. Kobayashi here is the first one, so maybe would you like, what is your whole opinion for today's webinar? And what is your actual hope for the future in preserving this traditional architecture? And what is your hope to bring this traditional architecture into the modern context? And what is your advice to all of us, especially the new young generation? So maybe that can you can wrap it up for your presentation today. Prof. Kobayashi, I think you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Maybe the host can help Prof. Kobayashi. Okay, that's good. That's good.
So anyway, thank you very much for inviting me today. So I feel a little bit nervous to make a presentation today because Andy suddenly contacted me to ask me to make a presentation and very few information about the presentation but I enjoy very much to share the information with all of you. And webinar series is a very important. So easy to share the information. So before COVID-19, so we organized the conference with much energy and they use a lot of money and to decide a place for the conference. But webinar series is very convenient. So I think I really appreciate the organizers today, the coordinator today. Yeah. And then, so we are now in the global environmental era. And then, so maybe I believe the indigenous knowledge and technique is getting more important to reconstruct our future life. Yeah. So that is my viewpoint. Yeah, this is the reason why I continue to do the research to know more the indigenous culture. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Kobayashi. That's a very noble one because as an academician, you still have to continue doing your research because you need to contribute to the new body of knowledge and increase and heighten up the knowledge and let people, especially the community, understand about what is the whole worldview. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Kobayashi. So I move on to Prof. Eric Lechner. What is your advice to wrap up this session, especially in preserving the traditional architecture in the modern context? And what is the approach that can be useful for all of us as the moral for today's webinar?
Uh,
So
yeah. So yeah, I totally, Professor Kobayashi, I totally agree with your words, and I think it's not many things to add. First of all, I want to thank the organization and especially Alice. It was the most perfect moderation ever. It was really incredibly, yeah. And the committee form that this webinar was organized really perfectly, and we can see what in our times with these webinars with the Zoom connection is really good. We must not fly around the half, especially in my case, must not fly around the half world to attend a speak of 4 hours, yeah, and then fly again back. It is not necessary. And I think we have checked it just since 1 year that is really possible. Yeah. And I hope that these webinars are going in further times also on. And I will attend also the next ones, of course. Yeah. And my special thanks to my colleagues today and Peter, Professor Kobayashi, because I know I don't know if you know that because Peter was one of my dissertation candidates 3 years ago. And it was really proud to get the invitation, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting to hear the presentations, to see the presentation, and it was really interesting to hear the comments of it and to follow the discussion. And but I have, yeah, I told it already. It is really it is really hard to bring any identification in modern architecture because the roof seems to be gone, not not in all. In Austria, I can tell you in Austria or in Central Europe, roofs are really also important in modern architecture. But of course, it is more on the rural area, and so I noticed also in America and in Oceania and so on. But what we must find, and it is I think it is the hardest duty ever in architecture, what we must find. We must find any elements, we must find any architectural things to express this identification, to express a house where we live, that we can find a house where we live. In some settlements, it is really easy if you come home to find the house because all the houses are the same size, are the same shape, and and it is not so easy for that. Please, all you as architects, please try to find out elements, try to find out ways to express identification, regional identification, individual identification, And please share it with each other. This would be my advice.
Okay, that's good. Thank you so much, Prof. Lechner. And I think we should continue on this intellectual discourse. It shouldn't end here in this one session of webinar. It can be a lot of series of webinars in the future to come, especially and emphasizing on the importance of traditional architecture in the modern context. So thank you again, Prof. Eric. So I move on to Dr. Abida. Would you like to say your last words and your opinions, and maybe what is your hope for the future in terms of this traditional architecture? So the floor is yours, Dr. Abida.
Thank you, Professor Alicia. Before I will to thank you to Hirohida, Professor Hirohida. This second time we meet a few years ago. I use so many support to me to get PhD. And the second, I will to thank you so many much to Professor Eric Lechner. You know so much about me. You so many advice to me until finish my doctoral study in Tewin. And then I thought, again, I want to thank you to Professor Hirohida and Professor Eric, because when I sent invitation to him, to him, they also answer, yes, I will. I will join your webinar. Thank you very much. You support me. You support my program with the joint program my arsitektur Universitas Negeri Makassar and Universitas Tanjung Pura. And then about the traditional house, before I'm so many I know so many traditional hosts after I do research in my doctoral study. And then I think we have to if do research about traditional hosts, we have to stay in the location, not only 1 week, 2 weeks, but we have to so many times, so maybe years, because only month maybe we cannot. We don't know anything. And before I really, Professor Eric Lechner advised, you have to so many time in the location, so many home you have to take object research. Before I know, so I will suffer in the location. But I know so much. I know so much element, but the element ornament and the meaning element and the meaning the ornament and also maybe for me, I will do research about traditional host Indonesia. Maybe I will also I'm interested also do research in traditional host in Asia because I think the same. I think the same. The traditional host in Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia. And then for young generation, maybe for the researcher and the teacher, maybe have to do research about the traditional host, because so many traditional host is collapsed now, and the young generation didn't understand about. And then maybe if we can publish in the journal, maybe a book, so we can share together, share each other about traditional hosts. Maybe we can understand each other, its traditional host in Indonesia and maybe in the world. And I think traditional host is a heritage and not so many people know about the traditional host, because the traditional host is lost so many and going to modern traditional, but the old traditional in Bugis is lost, but in this time only the new traditional host. I think my conclusion is we have to do so much research about traditional host. I think that's all. Alicia. Before I want to thank you, Alicia, because you're nice moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Abida. That's actually wraps up and for today's session. And I think I'm agreeing with all the three panels. We need to have a very strong theoretical framework, especially in terms of understanding traditional architecture, because currently there's not much publication from each countries, especially the developed ones or the well-developed countries. So we need to venture more into what you call it, publicizing, to have a lot more of intellectual discourse, strengthen this in terms of our academic education, especially for our architecture students in all architecture schools in the world. Because currently we are looking more into syllabus and curriculum that is more emphasizing on modern architecture rather than looking into traditional architecture. So with that, thank you so much to all the panels. So as we can see for today's webinar, it is a very good webinar organized by Universitas Tanjung Pura, Untan, and also Universitas Negeri Makassar. So as we can see here, we can end this session by understanding that actually history is a bridge which connects the past with the future and that holds them together. And if you can look into innovation, it will be very impossible for innovation in the future without us knowing our own history, because an innovation which is independent from history will be incompatible with the present time. Therefore, if we look into traditional architecture, it is very important because it maintains our link to the past for the future. So if you put it in the Malay word or in the Indonesian word, tak kenal maka tak cinta. Okay, tak kenal maka tak cinta. If you don't know someone, you cannot love that person. So same goes to traditional architecture. So as you can see, the time now is 4:58 Malaysian time, and I think it's Indonesian time. It's 5:50. It's 4:58 Malaysian time. It's 3:58 Indonesian time because the time difference is only 1 hour, and the time is actually not on our side. And we have come to an end. Thank you so much for the for the three speakers today, Professor Dr. Eric Lechner, Dr. Abida, and also Prof. Dr. Kobayashi. And as the moderator for today from University Technology Malaysia, and on behalf of Universitas Tanjung Pura and Makassar University, we would like to thank you all, and especially to all the audience. You've been patient with us for the past 3 hours, and it is such a pleasure having all of you here. And we can hope that all of you can continue on to share your knowledge, your expertise, and those in the audience today can be with us again in the next webinar session. And especially we can share our knowledge in our fraternity, and we can actually expand the knowledge of traditional of architecture to the community and to the global context. And with that, the participation today had made this webinar a very lively and sprightly one. And to all of you, please put your hands together and please give yourself a big round of applause for making this webinar today a success. So, terima kasih, arigato gozaimasu, thank you, and hope to see all of you again in the next webinar session. Jumpa lagi semua. Take care and stay safe during this pandemic COVID period. So, take care all. So, we end this webinar session for today. So that's all from me as the moderator for this webinar session. So I passed it back to the host, which is Universitas Makassar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Madya Dr. Elis Sabrina Ismail for guiding this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of this webinar. I would like to thank the speakers for the informative and interesting presentation, and all the participants for your active participation. Hopefully, the webinar will be beneficial for everybody. Before ending this webinar, I would like to say my apologies to all the speakers and all participants for any mistake during the webinar is going on. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a picture together, so please all participants turn on your video. Okay. Ready? Slide one. 1, 2, 3. Slide 2. 1, 2, 3. slide 3. 1, 2, 3. Slide 4. 1, 2, 3. And slide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Ya, bye-bye.
Thank
Gamsanida.
you. Bye.
Professor Eric, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm planning go to Europe in November.
Thank you, Bu
Ah, ya.
Abidan.
Thank you.
Sukses
Thank you
Ibu
very
Abidan.
much.
Hey, Eva.
Selamat sukses.
Terima kasih. Prof. Liner,
Yeah.
Zerin is here.
We'll see via Zoom next time, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye. Good
Thank you.
time.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Luar biasa.